Hello again and welcome to FaithWorks. I'm Jim Grant, your host, and it's my pleasure today to be introducing you to a very special program. Our guest today is Dr. Ahlam Muhtaseb, who is a professor at California State University, San Bernardino. She is Palestinian by birth, but is now a professor at this great university, and she has been not only teaching courses in media, but also in the whole digital effort of communicating in modern technology. She'll be speaking tonight at California State University, Fresno, and we're so glad to have Ahlam here with us today.
Thank you for hosting me.
Before we start with talking about your documentary, 1948, Creation and Catastrophe, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your work in San Bernardino, your research, and why you're up here in Fresno to be at the university?
Okay, that's a good question. It's a little bit long, but I will do my best. So, as you said, I'm Palestinian, and I lived most of my life in Palestine, actually, until I came here in 1998 on a Fulbright scholarship. And I was doing a master's at Birzeit University and decided to apply for the United States, to come on a Fulbright because I wanted to study, in particular, the impact of the Israeli lobby on the fate of the Palestinian cause. Because it seemed like, for us, forever, that Americans don't know much about the Palestinian cause. They don't know the roots of the conflict. And it seemed like there were a lot of efforts to suppress any Palestinian narrative in the United States. So that's what really motivated me to come here. And I did my second master's was in governmental relations with a focus on lobbying. And then I decided to stay here, so I went for a PhD, and my doctorate was in computer-mediated communication. That was the term at that time, which is now like digital media, social media. And so I continued really my research in media studies in general. My research, so I do a lot of research on digital communication, media representations of different ethnic groups, of gender issues, etc. So that's a focus for me. And I also am very, very interested in narrative theory and its relationship with identity. And that's because of Palestinian.
Can you unpack that, please? What is that narrative?
Sure. So I am Palestinian, but I'm not a Palestinian refugee. So my parents never left their homeland in spite of everything. They stayed. So when I came to the States, and that's the reason why I stayed, is I met my husband, my current husband. So we fell in love, and I decided to stay and do my PhD. Here's the interesting thing. So you fall in love with someone, and you don't think about the logistics of falling in love, right? But then it was impossible for us to find a common ground to live on because he was a Palestinian refugee, and his family came originally from Nazareth. They were ethnically cleansed in 1948, and they ended up being refugees in Syria. Then they left to Kuwait. He was born and raised in Kuwait. Then he became refugee again because they had to leave Kuwait after, the Gulf crisis in 1991, and then came to the United States, so he had all these. So he would tell me all these fascinating stories. And then we discovered, because he's Palestinian refugee, he can never go back to Palestine. Israel doesn't allow any refugees to go back. And I couldn't live in Syria with him if we were to go back to Syria because I was considered as someone who came from enemy territory. So in the United States, we were international students, so we had to go further our education and apply for naturalization because that was the only place where we could live, basically. Otherwise, we had to leave each other. And then I started actually getting more intrigued by those narratives from him and his family and how strongly they felt about Palestine. For me, I took Palestine for granted because I lived there. It's like my homeland. I know I'm under occupation, but it was different. Like their perspectives were different. And their narratives, their stories of 1948, of Kuwait, of Syria, all these episodes, historical episodes, created a very unique integration of their collective and individual identities. They were unique to me. They were different from me, although I was Palestinian like them, wow. And we spoke Arabic, etc. But all of this started actually intriguing me into thinking I should study this more. I mean, I became interested as a scholar, not only as a Palestinian or a human being. And this is when I started applying for grants to go to the refugee camps, starting in 2006.
So how and when and why did you partner up with Andy Tremlett to work on this monumental documentary that's already 10 years in the making?
So I met Andy in 2007, I think, probably even before. It was an anti-war rally somewhere in San Diego. It was like a group of activists from different walks of life, and they were all congregating, like probably hundreds of them, to protest the war in Iraq. And I was introduced to Andy by a mutual friend who we both volunteered with for, a TV show focused on the Middle East in San Diego called Alternate Focus. It's like an alternative TV station. And our friend told Andy I was doing this research in the refugee camps. Now, as a media studies professor, of course, and social justice, also professor, you always have to ask the question, how can I give back to my my participants in the research? So you do research, you benefit as an individual, right? Although I'm motivated by love for knowledge, but at the same time, I was also, thinking, what would the refugees want to do with this material? How can I integrate them in my research? So when I started asking them that question, they all wanted their voices to be heard. Like nobody cares about us. In the U.S., nobody knows how we live. They only have a very negative, image of Palestinians as violent, terrorists, etc. Nobody knows how we live in the refugee camps. That we have lived in this situation since 1948. And so my university, Cal State San Bernardino, supported me with grant money to buy, filming equipments, modest ones. And I wanted to make a documentary on the oral histories of the refugees.
Wow.
So my focus was small, actually, and I had limited filmmaking skills. But then Andy said, he knew I was going back. In 2006, I was prevented from finishing my work because Israel invaded Lebanon in the middle of my work. And I had to leave, and it was a total catastrophe at that year. And I couldn't go back, and I had to come back to the United States, etc. So I wanted to go back in 2008 and finish my work. And this is when Andy, after I met him, learned about that. So he called me and he said, Ahlam, I learned you were going back, etc. So he said, listen to me, I have this idea and I don't know what you think about it. Instead of doing a film only on the oral histories of the Palestinians, when you show it to Americans, they would still be confused. I am like a white, average American who is, represents a majority of Americans. And I went for a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies, and I still did not get the conflict, did not understand it, until I learned what happened exactly in 1948, which was like the systematic ethnic cleansing of Palestinians to make room for the new state of Israel. So he said, it would be better if we actually use those narratives that you are collecting to tell the story of 1948. It's like a larger project, but it makes more sense because it educates people before they hear those stories of the refugees. And so he actually convinced me. I thought, well, that's a great, use of my resources and his resources, etc. And that was an idea he had for some time. So we teamed up and we started working. And we never, ever expected that it would take us 10 years. We thought probably 2 years. But then it was like the more you go, the deeper, the more you get out. And it's so intriguing. You get more stories, and you are pulled again. And it was so hard to say we have to stop pre-production or actually even production itself.
So let's see that first clip, which is introducing us to some of the work of your early work with these interviews.
It's a black hole. I don't want to think about it.
The feeling of you have a state of your own, a Jewish state, no one can no one have ever lived such a situation.
It's such a grave injustice, and that is really what hurts you. It's a grave injustice that has not been at all attended to and taken care of.
Only when I answered your question, I knew about it. Yes. I know that I don't want to think about the 48.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict can seem impossible to comprehend. But there is a way to make sense of it. By looking at the year that most changed the lives of Israelis and Palestinians, 1948, it becomes possible to understand the basic dynamic of this conflict. For Israelis, 1948 was a year of creation. The terrible injustices Jews had faced throughout the world would finally come to an end with the realization of their long sought-after solution, a Jewish state in Palestine. For Palestinians, 1948 was a catastrophe. That one year saw the destruction of hundreds of Palestinian villages and towns, their inhabitants replaced by outsiders from Europe and Russia. And most Palestinians would never see their home again.
How challenging was it to get Jews and Arabs to share their personal experiences? And then, how important was the Arabic and the Hebrew language difference for you making this English language film? How difficult was all that task?
It was very difficult. Now, for me, I speak 3 languages. I speak 4 languages, actually, but I speak all 3, Arabic, English, and Hebrew. Andy speaks only English. And by the way, you just listened to his voice. Actually, he's the narrator, although we are looking for a celebrity narrator, but that's for later. So, although I speak Hebrew, I couldn't interview the Israelis. You see, we wanted to be fair. And we wanted really to interview Israelis. Actually, probably we have more Israelis in our film than we have Palestinians. And we wanted to give them the chance to say their perspective, you know, how they saw things. And many of them were honest. I mean, they said, we kicked the Arabs. We expelled them because we needed the land to build our homeland, as you saw in the clip. You know, there was a lot of empathy with the Jews because of all the horrible things they were going through in Europe. And Palestinians actually were sympathetic also, and they had a lot of empathy. And so when the first waves of Jewish immigration to Palestine started very, very early, like at the end of the 19th century, Palestinians were not alarmed by those. They were actually more sympathetic to them. It was only when the Zionist project became clear to them that this was a project to basically take away their land and create a new homeland for the Jewish people that things started changing. And so to go back to your original question, so we wanted to be fair to everyone and have, you know, voice for everyone. I am not allowed to go and interview Israeli citizens simply because I'm from the West Bank. And the West Bank is recognized as occupied territories by the United Nations, even the United States. And so there is a semi-borders, like a green line, and now there is the wall, of course, which separates the West Bank from the rest of the 1948 territories, which is now referred to as Israel. So it was Andy who went and did the interviews. And he also interviewed Arabs in 1948, those who stayed, did not leave in spite of everything. They are a minority, but there are still Palestinian Arabs in proper Israel today. So he, as an American white, young man, it was easier for him to have Israeli veterans, who fought in 1948 and who expelled the Arabs or the Palestinians, etc., to sit down with him and open up for him. Although not all of them. Many refused to talk. Many said, I don't want to talk about this. Like the guy who said, that's actually Yaakov Keller. He said, it's a black hole. I don't want to talk about it. Similarly, there were many others, like, I don't want to really even think about it. That's done. It's, we have a state now, and I don't want to reflect on it. But some were willing to talk to Andy and open up for him. And so he had a fixer with him all the time, and then we had to transcribe all the interviews from Hebrew to English. And we transcribed we were very meticulous in our research. We transcribed all Arabic into English. Everything had to be transcribed in English. And even we had interviews in English because some Israelis and some Palestinians spoke in English, and also the historians, most of them spoke in English. So we also transcribed even those for accuracy, and also to fact-check all the interviews. We couldn't just put anything, of course. So we had to go back and research the quotes and make sure historically they make sense. They are accurate. They are mentioned in books and in research. We used over 20,000 pages of research. Wow. And we had about 90, a little bit actually over 90 interviews. Of course, when you do make a film, you can't use of them. Probably I would use them when I write my book next year.
One more clip we'd like to see before the break, and it's about the inability of the Palestinians to return.
Were this just an accident of war, then that accident of war would have been repaired within a few months of the implementation of Plan Dalet by the return of these people to their villages. They were not allowed to return.
החודשים האחרונים של המלחמה היו ניסיונות לא לחזור אולי, אבל להסתנן, לקחת ציוד וכן הלאה.
هلا بعد ما هالفا الخمس 6 اشهر 7 اشهر المصاري اللي مطلعينها خلصت والبلد فيها الشغل واواعينا اللي لابسينها مزعت. شو بدنا نعمل؟ الله ابوي لامي قال لنا نازل على فلسطين. كيف بدك تنزل؟ قال لنا نازل ونازل على الكابري. اذا رجعت بعد 15 يوم رجعت، ما رجعت بتكون انقتلت.
Then one day we got an order to take the jeeps and spread out and to shoot every Arab whom we saw coming back. And this is what happened.
Go to KNXT.TV. You'll discover that your Catholic television station is streaming live on the web. Just click on the live broadcast icon to open. It's KNXT live on the web, just as you see it on television, broadcasting live by video streaming 24/7. The only television station in the Valley that brings its programming to you and the world, anytime, anyplace, anywhere. And it's only here at KNXT.TV.
Celebrate Sunday Mass with KNXT from beautiful St. Anne's Chapel every Sunday at 7:30 a.m. and again at 5 p.m. This weekly broadcast of the Sunday Mass has become the cornerstone of diocesan evangelization, touching thousands of viewers, both Catholic and non-Catholic alike, with the Word of God and the liturgy of the Eucharist. Sunday Mass from St. Anne's Chapel, 7:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. on KNXT TV, your Catholic television station.
Welcome back to FaithWorks. My guest today is Dr. Ahlam Muhtaseb, who is a professor at California State University, San Bernardino, and she has been sharing with us some segments from her brand new, almost completely finished documentary, 1948, Creation and Catastrophe. I wonder if there's something, before we see the final clip, that you wanted to say about that segment on return and the difficulty that there has been since 1948 for Palestinians to return.
Sure. First, I want to correct something I said. I said Andy speaks only English, and actually he speaks some Arabic. He learned some Arabic, which made it easier for him to follow on the Arabic interviews and also in editing. So I just wanted to correct that.
Good for Andy.
Yeah, good for him. So I want to link this to my original point when I talked about how I met my husband and the obstacles we faced, because this is the heart of the story. The creation of Israel was built on many myths, And some of these were like, people without land for a land without people, which was not true because there were thousands of, like over about 1.5 million Palestinians were already there. That's one thing. But there are other myths about the conflict, for example, like the fact that, Palestinians just ran away and they never came back, which is absolutely not true. Number one, there was a systematic expulsion of Palestinians, and we show this in the film, the systematic way and the documentation of the expulsion plan, like Plan Dalit, for example, and other plans. And we actually use a lot of archival materials. Some of this are from the Israeli Army archives, actually. Images, we use documents, etc. And so here you don't see the rest of the clip, but people like Ori Avniri, he's considered a symbol of peace actually in Israel. He says it the way it is. He says, we made sure they don't come back. And that's, Rashid Khalidi is a professor from Columbia. He's a famous historian, one of the most prominent historians on the conflict. He says, if this were to be just an act of war, why the Palestinian refugees were never ever, able or allowed to return? So that's a very important question now in the complexity of the Palestinian issue, in addition to the settlements, which if you want, we can talk about it a little bit late. But the issue of the return, at the end, Bar-On is the last person who talks in the clip. He actually continues his narrative, and he says how he used to hide in fields and wait for Palestinians to come back, and he would shoot at them if they came back. And one day there was a group of Palestinians trying to come back for harvest, and he says that they came back to harvest their lands because they needed money and food because they left with nothing, and he was hiding for them, ambushing them. So he stood up when the guide who was leading the group, and he surprised him, and he was only like a meter away from him. So that Palestinian jumped and embraced him or hugged him because he was so afraid. And then he says, I became afraid, so I had a handgun and I shot him point blank. And he said, from my perspective, I don't regret it, and I didn't regret it, and I don't regret it. I had to do it. And then on the other hand, he fell on the ground in my arms, and I looked at him and I said, poor fellow, and then he laughs in the clip. And I think this is one of the most interesting clips where when you ask them to tell, the Israelis to tell their part of the story, they were very conscious about what they were doing. It was very planned. Like all of them say basically the same thing. However, they try to justify it, of course. They justify the unjustifiable using things like, well, we needed a homeland, we had to do that. And of course, for anyone in the world, ask any person, like if I come to Fresno and kick you out of your land and tell you, well, I need it, I have to, because I'm being persecuted or I need the land, etc. Like, how would you feel about that? This is the main question, and this is what Farid Abdel Noor at the end says. Like, was it really worth, like, was that a good plan? Was it worth it, the expulsion of a whole nation, the ethnic cleansing, the genocide? This, until today, I consider it genocide because it's continuous. It did not end. More and more Palestinian land is being confiscated and taken away by the Israelis for Jewish use. This is, like, I can't believe that the world don't see this injustice, you know what I mean? And I think it's because of this hegemonic, dominant narrative of the Israelis, especially in U.S. mainstream media.
One final clip is very well chosen. You picked it for its ability to give us, in a summary, what is the situation now, and it concludes with that thought from Farid Abdel Noor. Let's play that third clip and then give you a chance to further comment.
والله لو انك تشوف بلدي انا رحت زرتها والله تشوف بلدي جني ساكنين فيها يهود اوروبيين نقاشين بيعملوا تماثيل وإيش من النوع باجي بدي اطل على الدار اللي كنت ساكن فيها كل شو بدك قلت له هاي والله داري اللي كنت ساكن كان لا داري ولا دار قال دار اللي بسكن اليهودية بتقول لي اللي بسكن.
The Zionist movement was successful in establishing the State of Israel. But the dream of a safe haven for the Jewish people has not been realized. Since the end of the 1948 war, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has only grown more complicated and intractable. And the hopes, fears, and grievances that drove the conflict in 1948 are still central to the conflict today. Israelis build more and more settlements in the occupied West Bank, and Palestinians continue to be cut off from their homes and livelihood by military occupation, home demolition, checkpoints, curfews, and the construction of a wall that runs deep into Palestinian territory. As a result, Israel now controls nearly all of historic Palestine.
Here's the question. Was the establishment of the State of Israel so important that no matter what price Palestinians had to pay for it, it was worth it?
How you see a way out after 68 years of sort of like an intractable situation?
I'm an optimist, and I believe in actually resolutions, even with the most difficult, horrifying situations. And I think to redress this historical wrong is to create one binational state with equal rights for Palestinians and Israelis. Now, and allowing the Palestinian refugees the right of return. We have now, the Palestinian refugees are the largest refugee population in the whole world, even more than Syrians. Probably people now think it's Syrians. Palestinians are still the largest. They are estimated between 6 and 7 million, human being, Palestinians in diaspora. And they have to be allowed to go back to their homelands and also the right for compensation. Some Israelis or many, Zionists, when they hear this, they think, oh, they want to destroy Israel, they want to throw in. Well, we should change or, dismantle Israel. It's not necessarily violently. You don't necessarily to keep on doing wars and go into more conflicts. It's this, it starts with addressing the fact and admitting this was a historical wrong. This was done at the expense of the Palestinians. This took away the livelihood and the homelands of Palestinians. And then how can we work together is to accept the fact that we need a binational, secular, one state for everyone to be treated equally as equal citizens.
And I hope that we will study better the situation that occurred in 1948 to get some grasp of what the refugee crisis is even today. Many people are actually becoming concerned with what is going on with the refugee crisis of the Syrian people. Many will have no idea that many of those Syrian refugees are displaced Palestinians.
That's true.
Thank you for watching this program. We hope you will continue to watch KNXT and FaithWorks. Until next program, God bless.